You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Force 13 live, as you can see, Hurricane Ida is on a strengthening trend. The National Hurricane Center has just published an update with 85 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 984 millibars verified by Recon. The storm is intensifying and has become much more better defined on satellite imagery in the last few hours, with the eye temperature going from non-existent to now minus 35 in the last hour, currently holding at minus 37. Quite clear that the storm is on an intensifying trend, but winds are yet to catch up. And that's what we'll be looking out for next as we monitor the next few hours of this storm between the full advisory that's just been published and the intermediate. Let's just check that new National Hurricane Center cone before we go any further. This is the old one. Let's take a look at what the 10 a.m. CDT cone looks like. There it is. So those two... Well, first of all, they're expecting Category 3 in 12 hours. That's the first M point for major hurricane. The second point there is 115 knots, which is 130 miles per hour. That's Category 4. And the third point is the same. So they've decreased their peak by 5 knots, but you could argue that that 5 knots could be in between those two major hurricane points. That's open for interpretation. Nonetheless, that's just the 5 knots here and there. It's still a major hurricane expected and a major hurricane landfall expected for central Louisiana. My name is Nathan Foy, here in the studio once again with continuing coverage on Hurricane Ida and also little bits on Nora, which is also a hurricane, also a Category 1, also with hurricane warnings for the coast of Mexico. And I'm joined by Joey, Noah, Euxinator, and Walter for this hour. Hello again. Welcome aboard.
Hello.
Where do we go from here then with Ida?
We did make a quick note about changes to the cone during our break. And we have now noticed that New Orleans is now no longer in the cone, but that doesn't mean that you will not be seeing impacts from the system. Many people look at the cone of uncertainty and say, if I'm not in the cone, the storm won't affect me. That's simply not true. The cone is to show the uncertainty of where the center of the storm will lie. So even if you are outside of the cone, you will still see impacts from the system if you are near the cone or under hurricane or tropical storm warnings and watches. So do keep that in mind.
I was hoping we'd be able to get a visual depiction of that cone on this screen as well, but we don't have that yet. But from what I gather, it's by, just a few miles.
Yeah, that's what we have been hearing.
Please continue to send your questions in. It's the interactivity makes this coverage what it is. Hopefully, very useful and what's needed. Falco Lombardi says, in my opinion, this storm is looking good on satellite and radar, but no increase in wind speed, and the eye is there. Why is that?
wind speed has to catch up with the organization of the storm. That process usually takes a few hours, or at least sometimes.
Is this catching up more slowly than usual, though, or what's the deal with it all?
Yeah, I can't really tell you, Nathan, but I I would honestly say that we had very slight increase in the wind speeds, but they're still all rounding to 85 miles an hour.
All right. Is Pensacola Beach, Florida, looking almost outwards, I think. As you can see, the cloudiness has increased there throughout the day. It's you're getting a bit of sun, but looks a little bit choppy. You wouldn't want to venture out into the seas, of course, anywhere around the Gulf right now. And currently can't get the New Orleans cameras just at the moment, but I imagine nothing much is happening there. Just a little snapshot. Of course, we'll be seeing a lot more on the webcams tomorrow. Let's look back at the National Hurricane Center's forecast track and really dissect the timings of it all. So there's the 10 a.m. position, and then the first M point there, that will be at 7 p.m. Central Time, if I'm not mistaken. And then the next one, it's cut off, so I can tell you that's 7 a.m. on Sunday is the second point. The third point will be 7 p.m. on Sunday. So if you were to extrapolate that out, they're expecting landfall probably at about 6 p.m. Sunday. So that would make it later on in the day, obviously, and that would be how long from now? Trying to figure that out. 30 hours, I think, from this moment in time.
It should be a little bit less than 36 hours because the 36-hour point is still 130 miles an hour.
And then moves inland, and by 7 a.m. Monday, it's along the Mississippi River there. 7 p.m. into Mississippi, just 7 a.m. Tuesday, it's headed towards Tennessee, and then it sweeps out northeastward there as a remnant low. Christie says, does Ida have a chance of hitting as a high-end Category 3 at landfall? Well, 5 knots lower than this forecast, and the answer is yes. But at least Category 3 is what we'll be saying at the moment. Category 4 is currently forecasted now for landfall and has been forecasted for quite a little while now, since yesterday evening. Let's check some latest satellite imagery then. One of the infrared channels. There's some more imagery. It doesn't look like the eye has deepened anymore. In fact, it's done the opposite. It's at minus 40 degrees now, but it's still, it's halfway down, isn't it, Noah?
Well, it's pretty easy to have strong fluctuations with the eye temperature now because we have those hot towers rotating around the storm, and usually you get some hot tower that obscures part of the eye, and the eye temperature drops over like 30 degrees, and then it clears out again. So about now is the time where you have extremely high fluctuations of the eye temperature, and the eye temperature isn't that much a indicator of how strong the system is, per se, more or less. More the convective organization of the system I would look for at this current time. Also, we have I don't know if this has been mentioned, but the newest what is that? Air Force vortex data message from the recon. They reported a circular eye with a diameter of 24 nautical miles.
I was going to ask you about that elongation, so I'm guessing much less so now.
Yeah, they have reported circular eye. So that elongation earlier, that was because of those hot towers, and this is the elongation is now gone.
Another question there which might be pertinent, how could we compare this upcoming intensification phase to Laura's intensification phase?
I don't like to do such comparisons really. Um, only keep in mind that um, the intensification phase could be relatively similar in terms of wind increase and pressure falls. Um, as for example, the HWRF has been hinting at a landfall which would be practically with the intensity of Laura in the upper 930s. And NHC forecast is also hinting at rapid intensification event happening, which would be relatively similar to Laura in terms of wind increase over a certain time. So yeah.
We had a few more questions as well. What are our thoughts on the effects on the northeast? More importantly, they say, Pennsylvania. I mean, we've heard things about
Very uncertain to say.
storms in the past. In this year, you know, there's already been a lot of rain up there.
Yeah. And I think I know where this is going because Camille had massive amounts of rainfall up in the northeast, I think, which actually made out about half the deaths, if I
Crikey.
remember correctly. And um, but it's very, I can't really say anything about the northeast. I think it's too early to really say anything about that particular. But it seems that the storm decays relatively soon, and that rainfall in the northeast will be rather low.
Still looks to be looking better on the visible imagery right now. It feels, you know, it looks like it's increasing in its symmetry. Let's see if
Yeah.
we can get an ultra close up. There it is once again. Of the eye region. And in a moment we'll be able to take a look at the close-up infrared as well. And there's a longer loop of the storm's progress over the course of today so far. And there's
also
that infrared.
So on the rapid scan IR, the structure of the storm appears to be becoming more and more mature. So I wouldn't be surprised if the next recon really would have found a more pronounced pressure drop now, as some of the pressure drops and wind increases in the storm have been appear to be a bit delayed behind the structural improvement so far.
And there's the eye temperature lowering, increasing once again. And I know you talk about how it's not, how the cloud tops often obscure it, but it is something to be looking at in the very short term as things change very quickly, and just to see that general temperature go up. Minus 38 degrees in the latest frames. Let's take some more questions. Is there a possibility that Lake Charles could have a possibility of hurricane force gusts? I would say that's unlikely. To you? And another question, up until how many days is the GFS model accurate, because it shows another cyclone landfall in Mexico, although it's on September 13th. That's too far out.
Yeah, long range forecast from the GFS. Always take that with a grain of salt. Usually you look out for 120 hours around the range where the um NHC does their area of interests and invests up to 5 days out. This is usually the range where you can actually start looking for uh specific for specifics and the broader picture of synoptic scale steering influence on the storms
Well, when I'm
if they're
doing
expected.
when I'm doing TCOS estimates, I cap it at 6 days.
Yeah, so around 5 to 6 days out is usually the time you can look at it and be if it shows a tropical cyclone during that time, it's likely to be an actual thing. Further out, it's unlikely.
So the latest information as we come into this hour, as we have done, is that Nora is stronger, 80 miles per hour, pressure of 981 in the eastern Pacific, hurricane warnings out there in Mexico. And Ida, which is what we're looking at, of course, also appears to be strengthening, 85 miles per hour according to the National Hurricane Center, and a pressure of 984. And we expect further strengthening to occur and more quickly as the storm appears to be organizing itself very well indeed. With a good structure, would you say, Noah, looking at those microwave images earlier today?
Yeah, those look pretty good. And also, on IR satellite, it appears to be relatively mature from its structure. The northern side has a little bit less convection than the southern side, but those should wrap around. And the hurricane currently is only 85 miles an hour, so you shouldn't expect the most intense kind of structure with this. But for its intensity, it looks good, and it has a structure where you can see further intensification pretty easily.
Yep, completely agree with that. How likely is it for Ida to shift her cone back to the east and make landfall in New Orleans? I feel as more time goes on that we're only going to get more confident rather than less. It's it's rare these days that a storm springs a big surprise and the cone completely flops in terms of track, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also with this one, we've been more consistent and more confident than with other ones in the past. Here the models have pretty good agreement on where this is going.
Yeah, and also I want to note that in the very last frame from the Goes East band, it is now showing a clearing eye. Um,
It's been a process that's been going on for a couple of hours.
yep, and the storm did look like it weakened a bit. I mean, sort of, but like I guess in preparation for the eye to form. But now that the eye is forming, I think that we should see start any given hour or two.
Here's one question that will interest you though. Do you think that Ida could go through an eye wall replacement cycle whilst in the Gulf?
It's really hard to predict those.
Mm-hmm.
Could be not. It shouldn't go through an eyewall replacement cycle if it isn't more intense than it is now.
I mean,
Before.
it just went through what seemed to be like um the eye clearing, which did temporarily I think weaken the storm a bit, but I think now it's gonna be full steam ahead.
There's a question about the CDPS, currently a stage 7 for the Louisiana landfall on that 10 tiered scale. The CDPS scale, which measures the destruction potential of a tropical cyclone. Currently rated stage 7, which is catastrophic. And more questions. Will the storm become extratropical or die as a tropical depression? I think its remnants will survive back into the Atlantic and probably get sucked up by a front like they usually do.
Yeah.
Let's take a look back at some of our cameras right now. This is how it's looking this morning in Laguna Beach, Florida. Looking out towards the sea, a few clouds. Those are the very fringes of the hurricane. Not any of its big bands or anything like that. Destin, looking rather similar. A few people down there. Some of them in amongst the waves, which I wouldn't recommend. And of course we saw Pensacola Beach earlier. This is New Orleans right now. The sun's back out. And things are pretty quiet. You see a few people milling about from time to time. But generally it's a quiet scene in New Orleans. At least from what we can see from our 2 limited vantage points in the middle of town there. And once it's the last camera that is pretty temperamental, the one at Grand Isle, which I think we've got now. That's Grand Isle, Louisiana. Looks like the sun's gone in there. There are clouds in the area, the outer fringes of the storm, the peripherals. But things still look fairly calm now. We've been watching this camera rather closely and other locations in Grand Isle because that could well be a very close point to the storm's landfall. And in case you didn't know, mandatory evacuations in Grand Isle, but I'm sure most people would have expected that. Once again, there's the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, and let's take a look at some more imagery. Infrared right now, look at that. Latest frames showing a big deepening in the eye. Oh my. So, eye temperature in those latest frames now down to minus 29.
That's quite a big drop. It's expected when the eye looks like it's really clearing out now. So, like, now that it can be, I guess, now that it's visible on satellite, so.
It looks stronger than a category 1, that's for sure.
Yeah, it does. I think when we have next recon, we're gonna have. It's not gonna be quite a good find with that.
I agree.
Let's try and get our super close up once again. There we go. So you can see a bit further down there now into the workings of the eye. And still you've got convection blowing up on 3 sides, I think, just at the moment. But a sure sign of strengthening, which is continuing at this time. This is pretty much live. This is 1 minute imagery. At times it can be only 30 seconds old, so it's pretty much live. Let's take more questions. Egg Daily says, is Ida going to slow down before landfall or not?
Yes, it is expected to slow down before landfall, which will aggravate the rainfall totals. I'm not sure the exact speeds that it could get down to, but I do know that it is expected to slow down before landfall. Yeah.
I don't think it will slow down by a huge amount, but a little bit.
Yeah,
B.
currently
Miller.
it's moving at I think 16 miles per hour, wasn't it?
Hmm.
And it probably gets to around 8 or 10 by landfall.
Okay. B. Miller says, do you think Ida has a split eye wall considering the look on the water vapor imagery?
Haven't taken a look at water.
There's a
vapor,
little
actually.
trench down there in the south. You see on our little inset at the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah.
Let me take a proper look at this. Water vapor. I think on the most recent frame it almost looks like two eyes directly near each other, but I think this moist tongue is just something that reaches through the eye, and the actual eye fills up both of those warmer areas in the cloud tops, because of course Recon has said 24 nautical mile wide eye, and that warm area before that is probably not 24 nautical miles wide, so it's about to show off a bit how large the eye actually is, I'd say. Yeah, I think you can also see that when you loop a bit the water vapor, it becomes more apparent.
And once again, the visible of that emerging eye. More questions. How long do we think it will take for the eye temperatures to enter the positives, says J.O. Well, they could be already for all we know. I mean, usually they are, just that we never see it. But from satellite derived, it could be within 3 hours the way it's going.
New frame of IR just came out, and you can distinctly tell that eye is warming really quickly now.
Yeah, becoming more visible by the moment.
I think it looks much stronger than Category 1, actually.
Yep, completely agree.
If we only had satellite, I think NHC would have estimated the storm at over 100 miles per hour.
Oh, I'd go with
But
115 from satellite alone.
Really, you think it's a major right now?
not right now.
If you were just to believe
Yes,
satellite and nothing else.
Yeah.
But obviously we've got... I mean, this is the problem we have. We don't have recon for every storm. In fact, we don't even have recon for a majority of storms. The amount of storms that we don't know the true intensity of is just ludicrous, but that's an argument for another day. We're going to take a short break here. We'll be back again in a few moments. This is Force 13 Live covering Hurricane Ida. Over the years, we've done updates and live coverage on literally hundreds of tropical cyclones, and in recent years, particularly in 2020, launching out in other regional channels, doing weather updates and coverages there as well. We also launched our Earthquakes channel in 2020 and are going forward on all fronts in 2021 with a community that's grown remarkably in the last year. But it's not just about you being along for the ride, we want you to enjoy yourself as well as an Ultimate fan, and that's why we've lined up a big chain of benefits for each various stages on our Ultimate Fan program. Force 13 live coverage continues on Hurricane Ida, which is an 85 mile per hour Category 1 in the Atlantic Ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. National Hurricane Center gave it that wind speed and a pressure of 984, and what we've been witnessing in the last couple of hours is that the storm's eye has really been starting to emerge on satellite imagery and recon. We expect next time they gather readings that we'll be noticing a storm that's significantly intensifying. Back in the studio again, my name is Nathan Foy and joined by my team again here. We have Joey, Noah, Orlando, Euxinator and Walter to discuss this in further detail. In just over, well, in about half an hour or so, I imagine we'll be talking more about models because more model runs will be coming out. Last night I was in the Force 13 stage call on Discord and they were going on about the model runs as they came out for ages, and it's an event in itself when we're all waiting for those new frames to come out, telling us how bad the storm is going to be. It's sort of very odd in a way. But anyway, here we are, and if you have any questions for us whilst we're on the air, you can send them in. Our job is to deliver the information as best as possible, not to do anything or say anything silly. We don't do any scaremongering here. That's one thing we pride ourselves on, I think.
Definitely.
We're happy to take any questions. Such as, this is one to start with, will this be stronger than Laura? I would be trending towards no right now, considering Laura was strong, nearly a Category 5 after all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too soon to say if it'll be as strong or stronger than Laura, mainly for the fact that the matter is it's nowhere near as strong at the moment. So it'll have to wait until we see when it decides to become a major hurricane before that even becomes on the table.
Yeah, in such a situation, I tend to not do any forecasts or just going through specific wind data because we're expecting a major hurricane and landfall winds are going to be in excess of 115 miles an hour. That's extremely likely at this point. And also, if you have winds that are going in excess of 150 miles an hour, it doesn't really make a difference if you have 115 or 130. You're going to have major damage. And also with a storm surge, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So, if I'm in the storm surge prone area, I would evacuate anyway, and I would have my hurricane plan ready and be executing this plan already if I'm in the cone, regardless of the wind, if the wind is 160 miles an hour or 115 at this point.
Yeah, lots of questions coming in, I think, just now. Of course, we had that one about Laura. Do you think that it looks like Dorian in structure? These questions getting from bad to worse.
No.
No.
Not already. Although I think I'm getting where in the track of Dorian that would have been. That would have been by the time Dorian was, I think, Cat 1 or Cat 2, and it had this more of those bands to the north of it. So, if you're just talking about this small sliver of Dorian's track, you might even have an argument for it. But of course, that wasn't the time Dorian peaked as a Category 5. That was way before. Several days before the peak.
Latest eye temperature now -25. So it's rocketing towards the positives. And if it reaches positive temperatures, then that's pretty bad news because, I mean, I know I'm simplifying it, but you get an eye that's in positive temperatures surrounded by -70-degree cloud tops. If it keeps it like that for 12 hours, you've probably got a strong Category 4.
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate case right now as we just helplessly kind of just watch this thing quickly develop and organize. The structure on microwave was already there a little after it passed from Cuba, and now it's really getting itself together now. And uh, honestly, it's kind of off to the races at this point. And anyone that's had doubts like if like how much Cuba has stalled intensification at this point, it doesn't really matter, mainly for the fact of the matter is that once rapid intensification starts, the amount of rapid intensification, the pace that I can go at, would make that original detriment pretty much meaningless. So it's a very poor situation.
Looking at our wide shot again, visible imagery. It's really looking pretty good the more you look at that.
Has there been any news from local officials? Any updates?
I still didn't see anything from today so far, but I'm not the best placed person to be looking at that kind of thing.
Not that I know
No.
of.
I'll go try to scout for
What
anything.
I do know is that the highways out of the area are getting really congested now, and there have been a few accidents, and there's a lot of congestion as people are trying to evacuate, which is expected, but that just makes it all the more difficult to get people out.
Yeah, supposedly there's traffic jams extending all over I-10 right now, where a majority of the people are trying to pretty much evacuate from the area. But yeah, it's very unfortunate that there wasn't enough time for the New Orleans area to be able to order mandatory evacuations and execute that plan effectively.
Alright, let's read off some information. Latest from the National Hurricane Center, the 10 a.m. advisory. They expect, when you see the National Hurricane Center's headline, they say explicitly, Ida expected to begin rapidly intensifying soon. That sounds like bad news. 85 miles an hour, 984 millibars. That was nearly an hour ago now. To reiterate those warnings, a storm surge warning for east of Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge, Louisiana to the Mississippi-Alabama border, Vermilion Bay, Lake Bourne, Lake Pontchartrain, and Lake Maurepas. Hurricane warning for Intracoastal City to the mouth of the Pearl River, Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Maurepas, and Metropolitan New Orleans. Storm surge watch for Mobile Bay. Tropical storm warning for Cameron, Louisiana to west of Intracoastal City, and mouth of the Pearl River to the Alabama-Florida border. And don't forget Nora's out there as well, also a Category 1 hurricane, and that is on its way to Mexico. Well, we don't have imagery of that just now. We're looking again at Ida there, and you can see its eye continuing. More. Let's have a look. Temperature now minus 21. It's really coming out, and I wasn't expecting it to do it this much, but in what is it, 1.5 hours, I think, or maybe nearly 2 hours now. It gets very easy to lose track of time. In 2 hours, the eye temperature's gone from minus 53 to minus 21.
Minus 53 to what?
Currently at
Mine-
minus 21.
Oh my god.
And hold on, a new frame has come out, and that's now showing minus 19.
Great.
Usually you see this process happen much less quickly, where it might come out a little bit and then it will go away and then it will come back and maybe even go away again for a while and then probably come out. But from minus 53 to minus 19 now in 2 hours from satellite presentation, and yet still has a category 1 status attached to it, which is a correct one, let's not forget, because it was a direct observation, but clearly showing signs of strengthening, although it's very easy to get lost looking at the eye temperature. When you look around as well, the convection around it the cloud tops have warmed quite a lot since then as well, so there is a bit of a trade-off there.
Yeah.
So I found some news. I'm not sure if this has been mentioned, but Assumption Parish, about east of Morgan City, Louisiana, has issued a mandatory evacuation for its residents.
Yep, more mandatory evacuations. There's quite a few out there. I lost track of all of the ones, but there's that one you mentioned, and there's Grand Isle. So just for those who have just joined, talking about the eye temperature there before, minus 53 to minus 27. I tend to look at eye temperature generally to give you just a little hint on how the storm and the eye structure is doing. It's not a direct way of measuring how well the storm is doing, but it's a way to give you an idea of, the eye clearing out is usually a sign of intensification or a storm that's much stronger. So those are the temperatures inside the eye detected by the satellite. If that ends up going into the positive temperatures, that basically means that the satellite can see right down through the clouds and that there's not much disruption or clearing out of the eye, which is usually a sign of a mature hurricane. So the more we see that, usually, the more intense the storm is.
Yep. And also, eye temperature has, when you get into the higher intensities, there's a very good correlation with increase in eye temperature and intensity. So especially when you get into category 5 intensity and higher, increase in eye temperature, even slight increase in eye temperature, correlates very well with increase in intensity.
So what do we think about the storm's actual strength now? I'm seeing some people in the comments who are, saying that maybe getting ahead of themselves, perhaps, saying that the National Hurricane Center are underperforming. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I mean,
Uh,
recon doesn't lie. It is what it is.
Recon data has been showing pretty consistently support for 85 miles an hour, and I don't see any caveat to that. The storm isn't organized that much that it's totally impossible to have an intensity of 85 miles per hour associated with it.
I want to point out something that I guess is breaking news. Sort of. The eye temperature now is apparently negative 19 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, you heard it here first about 5 minutes ago.
Yep. So, because the eye temperature is now negative 19 degrees Celsius, this definitely means that the eye is 100% clear now, and that means that with the
Oh,
eye
man.
cleared, it'll be poised for the possibility of intensification.
We've got a new readout here now, minus 16.
Ooh.
Oh god.
Also, I've been hearing that we won't have recon for a relatively long time, apparently
no.
until 0Z.
Until when?
No recon until this evening.
Oh, wow. That's actually not good.
So we are left to our own devices for a while, and we've got an eye that's rapidly increasing in temperature.
I wonder if they'll make an emergency flight go out there, because I think that
Do
might
they
be-
even do that?
that's possible. That is.
Gee. Someone has pointed out, rightly, what do we think of the warm area just to the northeast of the eye? And I've noticed that creeping in recently. Don't know if any of you guys have seen it and want to comment on it.
Yeah. First, I first said it might be part of the eye itself, but now I don't know. I think we should just wait a little bit until we definitely know what this actually is. It could be just some subsidence between curling hot towers.
There's another similar question there. And just Black Void wants to know what is classified as a pinhole eye.
Every eye size that is below 10 nautical miles wide.
And 10 nautical miles is about, trying to get this right, just over 11 statute miles. And what are the current Dvorak estimates at this time? I will go and check the ADT estimates from Sims and Noah whilst you guys have a chat about that.
ADT is going 4.6.
Yep, 4.6 from Sims and 4.4 from Noah. So they're all running at about, yeah, they're running at 85 to 90 miles per hour, although both of them say a pressure in the 970s. But again, those satellite observations, we've got better observations from recon, although then you have the argument of where do you draw the line with this recon gap? At what point is that information that we had earlier no longer satisfactory? At which point can we use satellites normally again before the next recon flight? All of that grey area really, isn't it? Let's see if we have any more questions just now. What are the chances of Ida making landfall in Mississippi?
Practically zero right
Yeah,
now.
very low now, going down. Let's just throw it back to the National Hurricane Center forecast cone. You can see there, tropical storm warning, sure. And you can, and just to point out again, you see the size of the storm's wind field on that map. The sort of yellow amber area. And just to represent, if the center of the storm moves directly through the middle of the cone as forecasted, a perfect forecast, that 7 a.m. Monday point, the width of the cone there is still not as large as its current wind field. So if a storm makes so that means if the storm goes right through the center there, you'll still get tropical storm force winds outside the cone. Now imagine if it goes near the edge of the cone. That's why you have tropical storm warnings up to the Alabama-Florida border, because it is quite possible that tropical storm force winds, especially with an expanding wind field, will be felt all the way over there, even if it makes landfall in central Louisiana. So it's not going to make landfall. It shouldn't make landfall outside of the cone. Otherwise, that would be a bit of a forecasting blunder. But tropical storm force winds will definitely be felt outside of the cone. It goes without saying. Do we think a landfall near Port Fortune is possible? It's a little east of where the National Hurricane Center forecast. Well, if that's the case, then definitely yes. If it's in the cone, it can make landfall there. Is Ida gonna pull a Maria? Now that's another comparison I've not heard today.
Well, yesterday I said that yesterday's intensification has been similar to Maria's first intensification in terms of just you have a misaligned center and then one single burst over the center, and from there on rapid intensification. But now I don't see any comparison that would be valid.
Well,
First
that's,
of all, Maria is in the Caribbean, while Ida is in the Gulf of Mexico. You can't compare those. They are in two different locations, which they have two different geological. Do you say geographically different? How do you say that? Situation, not situations. But you know what I mean.
Yep. Now, latest imagery again. More convective tops starting to blow now.
Yeah, I noticed that in the last few frames.
That means it is probably now going to falling down to the fine moment.
One or two comments suggesting a double I, but that's not the case.
No.
And that's the
I don't
voice of
even know.
Alex. Welcome aboard.
Hello.
I don't even know what a double I would be. There's always just one. Except for maybe eye wall replacement cycle, which has two eye walls, but this is not happening.
Yeah, and two eye walls basically means it's just making its eye larger.
Yeah.
We'll have plenty of model discussion coming up in the next hour, I imagine, considering that the GFS is coming out and we've got plenty more besides. The icon always comes out first, and that'll be available already. We'll get the team to talk about that a little bit at the start of the next hour. More questions though here. What is Ida's eye temperature now? It hasn't changed since last time we looked at it. Could it be similar to Hurricane Michael? Why are all these comparisons coming out all of a sudden? I know what they mean with the Michael one, though, I guess. That didn't stop
Yeah.
intensifying until landfall.
It's likely that it doesn't stop intensifying until landfall, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be a Cat 5 at landfall. And also, I would just stop doing comparisons now. We're just at the now casting, and sometimes in forecasting...
It's a natural thing for people to do, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's natural, but usually when you do forecasting, when it's out 2 or 3 days, picking an analog which is close can be helpful to see where the actual ceiling of the storm might be. But now we're expecting a major hurricane regardless. Doesn't have to be a Cat 5 to be destructive.
Well, here it is as a Category 1. If you're watching for the first time and you've seen lots of hurricanes before, you might be surprised that it's still a Category 1. Certainly looks much more the part than that, but recon planes have only found 85 mph winds and a pressure of 984. That was a little bit earlier. The eye has deepened on satellite imagery really drastically in 2 hours, it's gone from minus 53 degrees Celsius to minus 16, which is pretty staggering and amongst the fastest rates I've seen. And just an update now, it's minus 14, sorry. So that trend is continuing in spite of cloud tops that are blowing up again around the edges of the eye wall. So this is getting pretty serious, I suppose. The intensification is clearly on, and who knows at what point it's going to end. We'll have more discussion with our team soon, but now we're going to a short break at the end of the hour, and we'll be back again with more coverage on Ida and probably taking a good look at those models. We'll be back soon.